Welcome, everyone, to episode one of Hacked by Halftime podcast presented by Victory Cyber Security Consulting, also known as VCC. I'll be a co host of this podcast. I am Travis Whitesel, and I am an Army cyber warfare technician and was a cyber threat intelligence lead for one of the world's largest networks, the Dodonay. However, the views that I present in this podcast are of my own and are not of the United States government. Just a little background on VCC. My wife is the founder of the company, and I am the lead consultant. I am currently a PhD candidate in cybersecurity, and I specialize in global cyber strategy. With that being said, my co-host, Steve Watchers, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Travis. Like Travis said, I'm Steve Watchers. I'm a retired Army intelligence officer and currently serve as an Army civilian for the Department of Defense, or not the Army, but just the DoD as a whole. For the past 24 years, I've built a career in intelligence and security, supporting its mission across multiple domains. Along the way, I earned a master's degree in sports administration and authored a published thesis titled Beyond the Gates and Metal Detectors, Understanding Security from Professional Sports Facilities, which was featured in the Sports Innovation Journal in 2024, which I heavily discussed and did research on cybersecurity in professional sports. For the last 5 years, I've specialized in the cyber domain, conducting intelligence operations at both the operational and strategic levels. And just like Travis said, again, my view, everything that we discuss is my views only, nothing to do with the Department of Defense whatsoever.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. So a little background on why my wife started VCC. She'll be joining us probably in later podcasts to discuss it, but I think it was important to touch on. Steve and I both have academic backgrounds in understanding cyber threats to sports. When I was discussing this with my wife one day, she said, well, who's helping? It doesn't seem like there's much help out there currently. So as a result of that, we stood up Victory Cyber Security Consulting. And it's really just focusing on protecting athletes as well as teams and organizations from cyber threats, breaches, and global cyber risks. So the first time I saw how big of a target the sports industry was during my master's program, which was featured on national security studies. However, I focused on the cyber aspect of security studies and then towards sports, diving down even further. For my thesis, I wrote about how cyber threats in the sports industry could actually affect national security, which will be an episode later on, and it's a really fascinating topic. But this, in turn, essentially became an intense passion of mine, leading me to sports data protection and cyber threats. Steve and I would talk all the time about it, and it only kept growing from there. The passion is to see what else was unprotected or what else could break within that sports industry. But Steve, what would you say was kind of your light bulb moment or where your drive for the topic came from?
Yeah, so my light bulb moment came during my master's program as well. Like I said, I got a master's degree in sports administration. And during that, obviously, you learn all different facets of sports, advertising, security, facilities, all that stuff. Because of my background in intelligence and security, I decided to focus a lot of the projects I was doing on that. So I ended up writing a research proposal in regards to security in sports with a focus on cybersecurity. And that's when I realized there was almost nothing out there about it. Zero. Talked to a bunch of the different professors at the university I was going to, and they were at a loss as well. So I started deep diving into it more. The real big light bulb moment came to graduate from my program, I originally had to do a internship. I was about halfway through my internship when my research proposal was discussed at a very large national sports conference. Because somebody was there speaking about cybersecurity, and they said how nobody's talking about it. Well, just happened so a few of my professors were there, and went to the speaker afterwards and said, "Hey, we have a student who has a background in this stuff, and he's actually talking about it." So through that discussion, the university called me and said, "Hey, we'd like to move you, instead of doing your internship, move you into doing a thesis because there's no research on this that anybody's tracking." So of course, got together with a couple of professors as my advisors and said, okay, I would do all the research, do all the interviews and everything because of my background, and they would help with the academic side and getting it published side. So for months, I did interviews and everything, and with general managers, some owners, security personnel within professional sports leagues and teams, and realized how big of a gap this was. Also had some discussions with like NCS4 out in Southern Mississippi, which is a great organization, super helpful with everything I was doing, but started asking questions and literally got told I was they're right now looking at it from the 30,000 foot view, where I was looking at it from much lower and much more pointed, which they said, "Hey, we are very interested in this." So that was my big moment. I was just asking questions and saying, okay, who's looking at this? How are you looking at this? And, why are we not, with cyber being such a day-to-day thing for us, from our phones, in our hand every day, to whatever else, as you and I both know, it's ridiculous. And the fact that people aren't focusing in on as much as they should, and not just, like you kind of hit on already, like, not just, hey, is the organization or is the team secured? There's so many more facets to this, and this thing's just a tree branch, a tree trunk growing into multiple branches you got to look at, and a lot of people aren't yet.
Yeah, and it's kind of terrifying, right? Because I love the fact that you said, when you went to go write your thesis and you're trying to dig for information on the topic, it sounds like you're running into the same issue as me, and we've discussed that where we've shared resources just because there are so limited amount of resources focusing on cybersecurity in sports. Because it's really fascinating. If you look up, anyone can go Google right now as you're listening to be like healthcare and cybersecurity or finance and cybersecurity. Really name your sector. You can go Google it and get hundreds of results academically if you use Google Scholar. But when you do the same for cybersecurity in sports, you're not going to get anything. The ones I've seen are like there's a pretty good article about wearable technologies in sports and some of the data there. But when you're looking at it from a more organizational standpoint, um, and it's really fascinating because it's like the soft underbelly of the sports world is it's billions invested into stadiums. We see that a very contentious topic within sports right now is the public funding going towards stadiums because the numbers are just
Outrageous.
yeah, they're astonishing, these numbers. And then you have the free Wi-Fi ticketing apps, and we talked about wearables, but they often lack security in mind, and it's nuts. And we've seen this recently. One of my favorites was the Liverpool ticket, the ticket
Hmm.
hack. For those listening, whether you like sports or cyber, that's a good one to go look at. Where essentially hackers were able to get into the Liverpool ticket database. We've seen, and these are all topics we'll discuss on later episodes and stuff. But Steve and I have talked about the scoreboard manipulations. That was a famous one for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then you have the famous one now with ransomware, right? So billions invested into all assets of the sports industry when it comes to, I mean, you think about even athletes eating
Yeah.
and all that sensitive data they use to track things as small as calories, right? But it's not protected.
Well, no, like, in you had a good point, because you think about a high star, a number one, number one, number two player, quarterback, or whatever the case is in the league right now. Choose, make a pick,
Yeah.
and their personal health information.
Yeah.
How well is that protected? If a malicious cyber actor decided to hack and get a hold of a top tier quarterback's personal health records and get their hands on them, they could absolutely put them up for ransom, because that could affect the player's ability to get signed by another team, their ability to play, how much money they're going to make, which then affects the team and the league overall. Like, it's a domino effect, and that's just the little things that, like, how well is this stuff being protected?
Yeah, because I don't think the sports industry has realized it yet, but competitive intelligence, right? You're going to
Yep.
have essentially cyber ethical hackers. We'll call them ethical, quote unquote. But a lot of this stuff is pretty. I don't want to say easy to get to, but without proper protection or monitoring, you nailed it. Like, hey, if I can get, we'll say, like you said, any star quarterback, really any star player in the league
Yep.
now, if I can get their PHI coming off of, which is private health information, right? If I can get that data and I can say, hey, that knee injury you said was good to go, isn't, I mean, it's kind of a dirty, unethical move, but at the same time, you have to look at it as almost a risk analysis, right? You're looking at an asset, and that's what the player is turned into in the sports world now. Not to dehumanize anyone, but that's really, I mean, you're talking about millions of dollars invested. It's a business asset at that point. So it's really, really cool from my standpoint to see in the future. I think you could definitely have competitive intelligence kind of probe for data to gain an advantage when it comes to these contract negotiations. So also why cybersecurity matters. We talked about high value star players, right? But now you have this NIL coming into the name, image, and likeness, right? I was just on the website for listeners. If you're like nerding out and doing data, or you're just interested, is a website called On3, and you can see NIL deal for college athletes. And some of these college athletes are now competing salary wise with at least professional level. I wouldn't say anyone's up at the star level yet. I say yet because that's just where we are. But there's high school kids getting it as well. That's tracked on three. In fact, I just saw Travis Kelsey and some high school stars are having like a commercial together, which is part of an NIL deal. So they, with this NIL deal though, as athletes as high value targets is what we would call them in the cyber world. Is a high value target is essentially, if you're looking at it from a criminal or a malicious perspective, if I can get that target, it's worth 100 other targets that were minuscule. So I'm going to focus in on that high value target that has big data, big money, because that's ultimately what's driving a lot of malicious actors is the profit, right? But they're essentially walking data centers if you think about it. These pro athletes and these NIL stars, when it comes to banking info, biometric data, and all of this. We have blogged on VCC about some of the scams that have been out there. I think it was Dwight Howard. I know it was Dwight Howard. I'm trying to think of the number. I think it was about $7 million he was duped out of because everyone is trying to get in on these endorsement deals and stuff like that. So the high value targets, Steve, with your background, what do you think about athletes as like high value targets?
I mean, yeah, like 100%, because let's be real, like the actual players, right? They are the, they're the nil, they're the name, they're the image, everything. So everything rests on them. These contracts are signing, whether it's for endorsements, whether it's commercials or appearing appearing on a podcast, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Like the fact that so much money's tied to them. Okay, that's obvious. It's always been happening, right? That's not a new thing. The new
Yeah.
piece is now, like, our question, which I think you and I have discussed, obviously, is at what point are these players pulled aside and said, okay, when it comes to financials now, because of all these deals and everything else, and the branding of it, because that's what it comes down to, is the branding.
Yeah.
What are they taught? How are they educated? Because that's a lot of what you and I both know from the cybersecurity. Most of it's
Yeah.
education.
Yep.
How are they educated on how to properly secure themselves? Especially your pro athletes, they're going to have somebody responsible for doing their public affairs aspect. But
Exactly.
still, like, it's at what point do you sit them down like, hey, these are the things you need to focus on. These are the things we recommend you do, in order to protect your name, the brand, the organization or university, whatever the case may be, and also your family.
Yeah.
Because how many times have we heard of somebody famous, whether it's a athlete or a movie star? Maybe they're not going to get targeted. You're going to look target malicious people are going to look for the weakest link, and they're going to go after maybe a family member to get their way to you. So, yeah, education, man. Like that's a big one. Is how are they being educated? Are they being educated? If so, how
Yeah.
much?
Yeah, and that's, I mean, you talk about branding, living out in Colorado, right? I think about Shador Sanders, even though he left to go to the NFL. But if you think about that, Dion and Shador being there, Shiloh, you think about them being there. If Shador's accounts were to get hacked and things of that nature, and it doesn't even have to be bad information. Like, it
Yep.
doesn't have to be that he did anything wrong or anything like that. Just the fact that, like, their reputation takes a hit. It's not just uh, Shador. Yeah, no, you're good. It's not just Shador or Dion being affected. It's the whole university's reputation and possibly revenue, depending on what comes out. I'm not saying that Shador would have anything bad, but like it's nuts to me because even if it's just like him flexing with his shirt off, which he does, he could. There's probably several pictures of him in camp doing that, right, or something like that. But like the fact he took it from his cell phone or whatever, it can lead to, we haven't seen it yet, but it could be the downfall of, I feel like, a university if they're not prepared for some of those things.
Well, yeah, and like, so we've seen this. Another aspect of it too, I think, is we've seen this on the government side a lot, and anybody can go Google the news for people that we refer to as leakers of classified information, or
Yeah.
what's the term we use? Sorry,
Whistleblowers or
whistleblowers. Yeah, whistleblowers. Like, all it takes is for a text message chain
yeah,
from a star's phone to get leaked because they went to a restaurant or a hotel somewhere and the Wi-Fi wasn't
yeah,
as protected, and they're just jumping on the Wi-Fi so they have good service, and
yeah,
all it takes is one person monitoring the network, like, what's this? Oh, wait a minute, and just start ripping that phone
yeah.
from a distance, via
That's
the
a great
cyber domain.
point.
Yeah, like, That's all it takes is something as simple as that. Did anybody talk to that athlete or that
Yeah.
star saying, hey, while you're traveling, use this phone instead? I.e., the term we all use is burner phones,
Yep.
obviously, or whatever the case is. But something, that's all it takes is, you walk into a friend's house and you're always
Yeah.
connect to a Wi-Fi network is on, and you accidentally connect to it, and they have no security, or they never change the admin password
Yeah.
out of the
Exactly.
box on the router, and that's all it takes.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
especially for, I mean, pro athletes, we've seen their houses get robbed this
yep.
year. This past year was huge for that. We saw cyber harassment of particularly female athletes, which was horrifying. And what I think about was like at the college level, what really scares me is, and you said it really well in the previous segment where we were just talking, professionals have essentially a public affair officer to say,
Mhm.
hey, you have a publicist that's like, hey, don't tweet that. Like, that's not a
Yeah.
good idea. And they have security as well, right? To an extent. College athletes are way more close to society because they're on campus, right? They
Mhm.
have to go to classes. Now, granted, if you're making some NIL money, you might not be living in dorms, but if you are, or even if you're living close to campus, cyber is a great way for people to also physically target you by following your location and all of these kind of things. So
Geotagging.
yeah, 100%, right? We've seen AirPods being used,
Yeah.
all these kind of things. The geotagging, on the Instagram photos, like a lot of people don't realize some of the tools are out there. You can just drag and drop photos now and get someone's actual physical location from what they call metadata in the photo.
Yeah. I was actually just thinking about talking about metadata because,
Yeah.
like you said, the
Go
photo,
ahead,
like,
please. Yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah, no, you're 100% correct. Is, somebody posts a picture on something, right? Uploads a picture. And if it's on a public, forward facing system, and you can
Yeah.
download that picture, which is not hard. I mean, even if the system has good security, it's still not hard. I both know that. Then
Yeah.
I can pull the metadata from it and get all the information that somebody doesn't even realize is there.
Exactly.
It's insane. One thing you brought up, it made me think was, the going back to the college kids, the college
Yeah.
athletes is, yeah, they may not live on campus, but we all have to log into a college system, right?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
to check grades, to submit papers,
Yeah.
especially if you're doing a lot of your schooling remotely. A lot of people, what do? We download the school app on our phone,
Yeah.
and so we have it on us at all times. And then we constantly keep it logged in. So that way, if there's an email or an update to a grade, we have to check. Not a you don't think a big deal, but if I was to hack the school system or that app or whatever the case was, and all of a sudden this athlete that's, a 5-star athlete who's probably going to have, has really good meal deals, who's looking at, getting drafted into the pros for whatever sport they're in. But then you start looking, well, look, their grades were this,
Yeah.
but all of a sudden changed. Because unfortunately we know that stuff happens,
Yeah.
as well as like, somebody submits a paper and you find out, oh, that star athlete, that's pure plagiarism. Nobody
Yep.
caught it. Like, oh, but we can rat them out now.
Exactly. And especially with everything that goes in, I mean, for those who follow sports, you already know. Maybe some of the cyber folks who don't follow sports, just go back and look at some of the draft discussions of any pro league. I mean, they're ripping these kids apart. I mean, down to what do they
Yeah.
eat for breakfast
Mhm.
every morning, right? And
Their
then
hands are too
judging them.
small.
Yeah, judging them off of that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's so you can only imagine what it would look like for a team if they say, "Hey, this guy has no integrity. He or she plagiarized 50% of their college work," or whatever the case may
Yep.
be. And it's unfair, but I mean, those are the kind of impacts we're trying to get the sports industry to really to think about, especially at the college level, obviously, and then at the professional level, understanding, hey, when you go to all these different locations and you're connecting to Wi-Fi, understand that you're running risks. And this is, like I said before, this is just high level episode for the first episode, and we'll dive into a lot of these things and techniques and all that kind of stuff. But the third part of why cyber is important within the sports industry, right, is to me, sports is unique compared to any other industry. And I'll gladly have this discussion with a healthcare professional. Finance might be the only one in my head that I could think of where I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. You might be a little more unique, but the big three that I think of that makes really sports unique, the sports industry unique, is you have global fan data and athlete data crossing international borders. If you think, and we're not just talking about UEFA or anything like that, when there's an international, like the NFL goes to Europe, think about like the MLB. You've got teams in Toronto. Same with, I mean, the NHL is you got a bunch of teams in Canada, so you're crossing borders there. And then you also have the NBA with the Toronto Raptors, right? So just from a normal operating perspective, you have this data crossing borders. And that, like I said, that's then you start including the NFL in Europe, baseball and Japan and Mexico, and NFL going to Brazil now. I mean, there's
NFL's in
all,
Mexico.
yeah, all of
Yeah.
these kind of these expansions that we're seeing. The NBA in China,
Yep.
which is wild, which is interesting to see sports kind of bridging politics there. The NHL going to Moscow in some instances, so really fascinating. Go
Well,
ahead.
yeah. So you bring up why is it unique, right?
Yeah,
And you mentioned something. You said China, but I'm going to go and discuss how NBA, specifically Dennis Rodman, assisted the United States in building relations with the director, or excuse me, the North Korea, because the North Korean leader is a diehard Dennis Rodman fan and loves basketball. So when Dennis Rodman went over there, he opened those doors in a sense, not physically, politically, for the US to have discussions, because Dennis Rodman was there, talking about sports with Kim Jong Un. And, that just allowed, that's one of the things that assisted. And I think it was President Trump's first time in
yeah,
office where he met face to face with the leader of North Korea. And he was the first president to step foot in North Korea, if I remember correctly.
yeah.
Don't quote me on that.
I think
But
he
yeah,
was.
like, yeah, but again, it just shows the ties, the impact sports has. Is it's not just for people to sit down on Saturday, Friday, Saturday, whatever night of the week and watch a
Yeah,
game. It's sports helps worldwide, and
yeah,
the impact is outrageous. But yeah, people don't think of things like that. They just think of, well, is who's playing tonight? Like, that's
yeah.
it.
And it's funny you mentioned that because I know I keep trying to help frame some of these things for maybe parts of the audience that don't know cyber, don't know
Yeah,
sports, right? But it's really fun when you bring that stuff up because then it's like, yeah, when you sit down to watch, we'll say the NFL game in London, the cyber people will probably know this, but sports people, just a little fun time is like things like there's protocols out there or regulations, if you will, is a better word, but just the amount of legal bureaucracy you have to go through from a cyber perspective with like GDPR. If sports people want to look that up. You don't really think about it from you think about it the logistics of like, hey, I need to get somebody, we need to get the team over there. You don't think about, hey, I need to get this data streamed from a different country that has different rules
and
back to
laws.
and
Y-
laws, exactly, and security requirements, right? It's a huge, really a huge monumental task to do those things, and I'm hoping to get some people on this podcast who have had to have experienced that to kind of walk through how challenging that can be, because I know writing about it and doing some game planning on it for academics, it seems like a nightmare. And it's something I would never want to have to do, but I want to
No.
talk to the people that have had the capability to go do that. But and then you also have the game day operations, right? So that makes sports unique as well. In hospital, I would say this is unique where you have life-saving equipment that needs to stay operational. But if you think about just game day operations, and now especially with the advent of live sports betting and all of these kind of sports books coming to light, I know this isn't academic, but if you look at Impractical Jokers, there's the show for anyone out there. There's a scene where Murr gets he has to turn off the NCAA Final Four game in a bar as his punishment, and he almost gets his butt kicked because people are betting and people are screaming at him, "I got money on this game." So you can only imagine that's at a bar. Imagine doing that worldwide, right? And you see it. These companies, I think it was last year week one for Sunday Ticket where everything was jacked up. The streaming was a bit jacked up. It was YouTube's first year, I think, or second year doing it. And they had to give refunds because of the delays that were occurring. And to see that, and that's just a system issue, right? That's like a misconfiguration or something along those lines. Imagine if it's ransomware or malware that's like, hey, we got you and now you don't get to watch your game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's huge amounts of money, right? Like, go
Well,
ahead.
let's think about like I think if I remember correctly, the number one sport in the world being soccer, or depending on where you're at, football, right?
Yeah.
And the World Cup. Everybody knows the World Cup.
Yeah.
Imagine if the World Cup gets watched, obviously worldwide. People literally take off work. I've had it where places I've worked in the
Yeah.
U.S. and overseas, where people are like, "I will not be here on this day. I'm taking paid time off or leave." Like, okay,
Yeah.
why? Just out of curiosity, why? U.S. is playing so and so, or these two teams are playing. You're like, you're taking a whole day off of that? Yeah, okay. Hey, you got it.
Well,
Go for it. But I mean, that shows you the impact. Now imagine if and again, this doesn't, and we're going to get more into this in
yeah.
specific episodes, but the malicious cyber act, the hacker doesn't have to be your advanced, state sponsored version of it. It can be a 14-year-old kid in mom and dad's
Yeah.
basement who's just
Exactly.
good with computers and is like, watch what I can do, and just writes some code, hits enter, and just stops one portion of the viewing
Yeah.
or whatever the case is. And how many billions of dollars are lost?
Exactly.
How much rioting in some countries like
Yeah.
Europe is going to take place? How, and the effect it has, and then none of that, but because of that brand is not the trust.
Yep.
Because that's one thing we'll talk about later, I'm sure. But the trust
Yeah.
we have in whether whoever's responsible for not advertising, but showing and running that program, whether it's MLS or NFL, or it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The trust, once that starts happening, the trust is gone. Like,
Yeah, because that's the thing, right? Is from really we call it enterprise in the
mhm,
cyber world, but think of enterprise as being the NFL organization would be the team, and then you have the entity, which would be like the athlete, right? From an enterprise level, if you're the NFL, you've partnered with YouTube for Sunday Ticket. Like that's the decision you've made as an enterprise. If YouTube, in this case, and I'm not saying this will ever happen, but if they do not start, like you said, if there's a 14-year-old kid, and we saw this, I think it was with Yahoo or Google, I want to say 5 or 10 years ago, where it was just literally that a teenager, in Eastern Europe ran code. He didn't think it would be as successful as it was, and it spread throughout the web and essentially shut down a Yahoo or Google.
yeah,
But it's stuff like that to where, hey, YouTube, if you shut down for just think of 1 week of games, like if you couldn't stream on a Sunday, we'll just say the Sunday, the 1 o'clock games, right?
yeah,
Those first parts
or
of
the
game.
Sunday night football,
Yeah. Or Sunday night football, Monday night football, right?
yeah,
Like all these
or
kind of things. But
or even worse,
if you take out,
isn't it? Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Because if I remember correctly, every year the previous Super Bowl teams that were in the Super Bowl play opening weekend.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everybody, like, if you think about it, like, there's like, oh, we want to see how this year's going to turn out, and that's a
Yep.
highly sought after game. Imagine if that's
Yep.
like knocked out and you can't
Yeah.
view it.
Just think about it. You
It's
go to turn on Peacock to watch the game and you're like, "Oh,
Yep.
is my app messed up? Is it me?" And then you go on the internet and you have millions of people being
Mhm.
like, "WTF?" I think it's huge. I
Yeah.
I really do, because that reputational harm that's right out of the gate, because people will be mad at YouTube, rightfully so, if something like that ever occurred, but they're equally looking at the NFL from a business decision
Yep.
standpoint to say, and it's one game, right? If we
Yeah.
even say one game, it is one. You have ruined my life. You're the worst. I'll never watch this again. Now, granted, we know probably not.
Death threats will go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Right. Like all of
Like,
these things will occur.
yeah.
And that reputational harm may never come back. So you have reputational harm to YouTube going on because they couldn't fulfill the requirements. So now the NFL is looking at them like, hey, we might need a different provider. And then you have fans looking at the NFL like, you're the worst thing that's ever happened to me, and you can't run the business. So it's also the one of the things that I think makes sports unique is the final bullet here that we'll talk about is kind of the culture of performance over security, right? So
Mhm.
everyone, like we talked about, you want access to the data. NFL team, all cultural or culturally, almost every major sports team now, professional and even collegiate, are being driven by data points. Like I mean, you turn on, I think it's Thursday night football belongs to Amazon, and you can open up the sidebar that says, hey, look at the advanced analytics from
Yep.
Google or Amazon Advanced Analytics, excuse me. And then on Monday Night Football, you have, hey, on the ESPN app, I can switch over to this different view and I can get all of these stats.
Live.
Yeah, all live. These data points are being captured. So it's performance driven, is what we mean by that. But however, you have to start thinking about how are you securing all of those data points, which is fun. And we often see that security budgets, and this isn't maybe unique to the NFL, but security budgets often lag behind in a lot of these industries.
Yeah, and if I could make a comment about that,
Yeah.
that was actually part of my discussion during my research for my thesis was sports is a business. We know that.
Yeah.
We could beat that. We could beat a dead horse with that one. Because why? It's a moneymaker. And so with that, security, whether it's physical, personnel, cyber, whatever, the security apparatus as a whole, it's a no profit portion of it.
Yeah.
It's all investment on and with risk. And
Yeah.
with that being said, it's like, okay, if I'm the NFL, right, they don't
Yeah.
dictate how everybody's procedures are going to go. They give recommendations, whatever the case may be. But if I'm a team owner, GM, whatever the case is, or head of security, I have to convince the stakeholders who are the ones investing millions and millions of dollars to say, look, I know I'm asking you for, I'm going to say $2 million is an arbitrary number
Yeah.
to upgrade these physical aspects of security. So metal detectors, maybe eye retina scanners for biometric data so we can pick up on things. I want to make these upgrades or, tie it to the cybersecurity realm. However, understand you're going to invest that much of this budget, but you're not going to get money in return.
Yeah.
It's a no profit gain because the gain is successfulness. We
Yeah.
successfully protected our people, the fans, the coaches, the team, the facility, the league, the name, the brand, everything.
Yeah.
But that's a big concern for people is like, because a true business person who has a business background and who knows how to make money, they typically don't like to invest money in somewhere where it's like, well, what's this going to earn me?
Exactly.
So that's another, and I
Yeah.
realized that multiple people that I interviewed during my thesis brought that same topic up.
Interesting. And it's to me, it's always fascinating because I have always tried to in DoD it's different, but like in the private sector, I've always tried to use the word enabler for
Mhm.
cybersecurity, right? Where it's like instead of looking at it as like, like you just discussed, and that's the way because it's business ran, like, oh, this is investment. I don't get anything back on. But what you're doing is enabling everybody else, like you just said, to make sure the show goes on
Yep.
successfully, and it's never looked at like that, which is insane to me.
Yeah,
And
but
it'll bite them.
yeah, but you're right though. But I
Yeah.
also think the way to look at it also is the NFL. Okay, pro sports. I'm just gonna use pro sports, not NFL
Yeah.
specifically, but pro sports is one thing. But now when you change that lens to collegiate level, where they're much more budget restricted,
Yeah.
and they are, there's now you're talking about, well, the individual players who are students also,
Yeah.
like you have to talk, how much can you legally, based on the
Yeah.
current rules, policies and stuff, laws, invest in them to secure them both physically, personally, on the cyber, whatever the case
Yeah.
is.
Yep.
So now hey, it might come up to, do we buy this upgraded security package, I'm just going to use the facility security
Yeah.
package, or do we invest in brand new turf or
Yeah.
in brand new equipment or
Yeah.
new medical equipment,
Yeah.
because,
And you know where that decision's going.
oh yeah.
Yeah,
And
9 times out of 10.
yeah. And don't get me wrong, I'm glad it's not me making that decision.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, you look at it though, and it's, hey, do we get a lot of these big programs in college? I mean, shoot, even when you look at I would say almost any program. Okay, yeah, Penn State, for example, being a homer, but like Penn State has a great football program, very
Mhm.
cool. But at the same time, they're also bouncing being like the number one turf school in
Yep.
America or the number one cybersecurity school, right? So it's fascinating because then I think you almost lose leverage in those discussions, I feel like, because you look at how much NCAA teams have invested into stadiums. So when it comes time to talk about like probably, hey, we need upgraded security, they're like, bro, we just gave you
Yeah.
$500 million for your stadium. You get what you get. We need to invest in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
medical or the judicial or lawyers, right? We need to give some money over here.
Well, and yeah, like you use Penn
Yeah.
State. What about like, and you know me, I'm an Oregon Ducks fan, right?
Yeah.
So look at Oregon Ducks, great football team. They have great investors like Nike just made, I think, the biggest investment in a college program in the history of
Yeah.
sports. But yes, in the last 15, 20 years, Oregon's come up as a football team. But what have they always been known for? Track and field. The Steve
Yeah.
Prefontaine days. That's who put them on the, one of the people that put them on the map. So when they look at it, someone like Oregon, who is a very dominant track and field team, one of the most dominant in the country year in and year out. But then now they have the football team who's doing really well as well. It's like, okay, so, our investors just gave the sports program, right? Like just gave us arbitrary number, $200 million.
Yeah.
We gotta disperse that, fairly to a point, but you have a school, you have these schools who are not just one trick ponies in one sport. But
Yeah.
and even Alabama is a good example because everybody knows Alabama football, right?
Yep.
But Alabama basketball the last few years has been doing extremely well,
Yeah.
been ranked, I think, in the top 10 the last few years and being
Yeah.
very dominant. So it's like, here's all this money. Where do we dump it?
Exactly.
Well, like now we gotta, it's like, all right, everybody bring your justifications on what you need and why, and we're gonna have to, rack and stack them.
Yeah.
And tying it back to the security aspect and specifically the cybersecurity, it's like, hey, after realizing we need a new field, we needed to buy all new medical, whatever the case is,
Yeah.
here's our small little pot left. You can have,
Exactly.
and oh, by the way, you're not getting the whole thing because we also need to do X, Y, and Z.
Exactly.
So you get half of that. And it's like,
And
thanks.
and that's why I love Sarah, my wife Sarah, who started VCC. Her idea was just do it affordably. Like do it to help people. Go if people want to see why cybersecurity is probably put behind a little bit, is go look at some of the contracts that are out there right now on these. And I'm not saying that these are bad companies, but like the contracts required to invest in cybersecurity to me is crazy. So like VCC, we don't sell software or hardware or anything like that. Our goal is education and processes because we believe at the end of the day, that's where 99% of your failures are going to happen. If you go out and you get Okta or Microsoft or Mandiant or CrowdStrike, Google has its own platform now as well. You go out there, you're probably going to be, for the most part, you're going to have a pretty good coverage for sure.
Good, strong companies.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you look at all of the breaches, I wouldn't say all, if you look at a majority of the breaches, they simply occur due to human error or
The number one
negligence.
threat to
Yeah.
cybersecurity.
Yeah.
The human.
Is the human, right? The human is the problem. So that's why we believe in like the education piece is huge as well as the process piece. And a lot of the facilities or organizations I've talked to, I'm sure in your master's thesis, you saw it as well, where it's like, all right, what are your processes? And it's like, well, if we get hacked, we just unplug everything and or we call Microsoft or we
Yep.
call this company and we try to figure it out. And it's like, have you ever tested these processes? Well, no. Hey, have you talked to marketing or your social media team what to do if they do get hacked or if their credentials get leaked? Well, no, we haven't done that, right? And it's just those small little pieces that usually they don't realize it, but they strengthen, like you said, man, it's education where they strengthen the team so well that they begin to figure it out. And when we talked about these cybersecurity companies, and I think that does make sports unique, I'll add a fourth rogue bullet there, is you mentioned it when you did yours, is where like, hey, the NFL provides guidance and recommendations. If you go look at franchises right now, there's 32 teams. I guarantee you there's probably at minimum 32 different vendors.
That's
if not more.
That's actually a whole section in my thesis that
Yeah. Look at the amount of vendors that are there, and vendors are those that provide cybersecurity services, right? So for those who are unfamiliar with the term, there's probably at least 32 vendors. I would even bargain to say there's more than that because teams are probably paying multiple vendors for multiple different things, and it's just fascinating, right? It's terrifying to me, but it's all good.
But like you said though, it's like the education piece is absolutely critical. Like I'll use for the DoD specifically. I'm just going to use the Army. I'm not going to try and speak for the other services, but in the Army, we're required annually to take what's called cyber awareness training, right? Cyber awareness training. I had a brain fart. And we get so used to it, I hate to say we tend to click through, but that's what we do.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there are things happening on the back end where an admin will send out a test email, a phishing email, to see how many people are actually paying attention to what they're doing. But again, it's that process of, hey, people don't realize like they don't have the education because it's not their strong suit, it's not their background, which is
No.
fine. But if they're not taught up front, like where the most basic vulnerabilities are, here's how you can, increase your security posture by 50% by ensuring everybody, and we all, and you know what I'm about to say, and you're gonna hate this, and we all do, but you have to change your password every so often.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
requirements for the password. Like it can't
Yeah.
just be my birthday. Not a bad idea. Always
Yeah.
always a bad idea, but
Yeah.
people do it. Because in the world Travis and I work in, I know on a daily basis for the different systems I use, I probably enter 10 to 15 different passwords for different
Oh, yeah.
systems.
Hands
And that's
down.
not it. Yeah, that's not even including the ones that are already like enabled by certificates and stuff.
Yeah.
But if these people aren't taught, like, hey, here's some things you can do to improve your defense line, in a sense, is you protect yourself more, so whoever can, it makes it more difficult. If they're not taught that from the beginning, like it's like having having the most secure house in the world, but you like to leave your windows open.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, okay, good, your doors all bolted, you got all this crazy alarm systems, but hey, bro, your first floor windows, every single one's wide open. Yeah, so I needed
Exactly.
fresh air. Okay,
Yep.
like, I mean, probably not a good
100%.
analogy, but it's just,
No, because I get what you're saying. Because then it's like, "Hey, I kept this password because
yeah,
I use it all the time." Okay, well, maybe it's time to change it. Well, then I would have to remember a different password, and that's what to me, the Windows Open makes sense because it's like, I've done this because it's convenient.
yeah.
Well, convenient doesn't mean secure, right?
No.
And it's
How
working
many
to get towards.
how many people right now on their computer or on their phone have a document stored somewhere of some type with all their passwords? And all it
Oh,
takes
yeah.
is me to, like, oh, come on, dude. Courtney and I, my wife Courtney, who has a background in
Yeah.
cybersecurity, we went back to the old little password books. We each have a little password book where we
There you go.
manually write down and have to change and everything.
Yeah.
Because manual nowadays is a lot more secure than it is, doing it
Yes.
digitally. Is it as easy? Is it as what's the word?
Yeah, convenient. Yeah.
Convenient? No, it's not. But you know what? It's a lot less likely, and that we always make sure none of our passwords match for different accounts.
Yep.
None of that stuff, but people don't realize that.
Yeah, and that's what's you'll for those unfamiliar with cybersecurity, you're always hear like the dudes who have been in the industry forever, like, "Oh, my sticky note's still holding up. Hasn't
Yep,
been hacked yet." And I mean, it's a fact, dude. It's a lot harder to get that information.
for sure.
I'm not going to hit some of these I'm not going to hit the discussion questions because I think we hit a lot of those already. But right, what can listeners expect in this podcast? We told you this is episode 1, so really the audience spectrum. Number one, who do we want to listen to and who do we want to connect with? It's the way we kind of broke this down is locker rooms, boardrooms, and then security operations center. So athletes, please reach out. And the reason we want you to reach out is, one, we want you to listen so that way you can get these tips about cyber hygiene. I mean, you're going to hear it throughout the entirety of this podcast, is really tips and tricks that you can use. We'll call them tips and tricks because they're probably new to you, but basic principles that you can lay down to really protect yourself. The boardrooms, we're interested in those budgets that we just talked about, right? Because I think you could still do cybersecurity affordably if you have your processes, your internal processes hardened and locked in, and you test them.
Yeah,
And then you can have the luxury of maybe saying, "Hey, instead of hiring this outside company for a few $1 million, hey, can I just get 2 more team members and pay them 200K a year and save the company a crazy amount of money with just 2 team members doing some of those things?" And then we call them securities operations centers, or they'll be called SOCs, is what you'll hear them called, SOC, from the actual sports organizations, both professionally and collegiate. We'd love to talk to them and have them listen in to see if maybe we misspeak, right? There's not a lot of literature out there on sports and cybersecurity. Maybe they're like, "Hey, we got this that we're doing, and it seems to be working," and help spread that knowledge throughout the entire sports industry. Tracking those sports specific TTPs. It seems like for some reason, competitive intelligence is kind of taken off with. I know it was years ago now, but the Cardinals hacked. I wouldn't even want to call it a hack, but access, I guess it would be by definition, access to information they weren't supposed to have access to. Got to the Houston Astros, right? And then you also had recently the New York Knicks accused the Toronto Raptors, I think it was, of illegally obtaining data and stuff like that. So what are SOCs doing to kind of protect that information? You got anything to add to those three, Steve?
no, I mean, the one thing I will add though is and I learned this a lot during my research, is and understandably so, what I'm about to say is a lot of these organizations, and I think one of the reasons there's not a lot of literature about this out there, in regards to security as a whole for professional and collegiate sports, is a lot of people are not comfortable talking about this.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to admit their weaknesses, i.e., talk about the skeletons in the closet,
Yeah.
because they want to keep everything as secure as possible, and their fear is the more we talk about it, the more of a target we're going to become, and that's completely understandable. I ran into that where even just in my research, trying to get people to talk to me was real hard. And they were like, "Well, I'm not going to talk to you because this." I had to come up with a system, which luckily with my career I'm good at, in order to protect those individuals. And I never mentioned, I had to promise and sign documentation saying I would never mention what team specifically I was talking to or the individual. I would keep all that out because again, a lot of these organizations and players and whatever the case may be are not comfortable talking about these things. So that ties heavily into there not being a lot of data out there.
Yeah.
There are agreements. I will say this, wave top wise, there are agreements between specific leagues and federal organizations and agencies. So that way, if something does happen to them because of the national impact it's going to have, or impact to national, what's the word?
Like national security or
National, not so much national security, but because every sports facility is a
like national preparedness.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, national preparedness and stuff like that. So there are protections in place for them to get more focus and stuff from the executive level, which is great. But again, people just don't want to talk about these things, and it's harder for them too because no individual wants to be tied to saying, "Oh, the team I work for is really bad about this." Like, no, that's
Yeah.
professional suicide.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just one of those things people got to take into consideration as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who do end up listening and say, "Oh, like I would love to join this discussion," we do have ways to keep you anonymous, and that way we can make sure that you're taken care of while still being able to contribute to the sports industry and the cyber security realm, right? So Steve and I talked about a lot about like, hey, that'll be in an upcoming episode. That'll be coming up in an episode. The three next episodes, just for a little tease, are going to be the athlete scams in the NIL era. We're going to take a look at that and really pick apart some of these NIL issues. Then you have ransomware. So we'll talk about some of those game day and why it's most likely going to become inevitable at some point. It's just about being prepared. And then talking about league policy and how it can lag behind cyber threats, which we've seen several times over the last few years, and how we've seen the leagues react to this. So it really comes down to, right, what we're trying to depict is that like hackers do not care, malicious cyber actors do not care if you're in high school and you got that NIL deal, if you're Micah Parsons getting the biggest ever non-quarterback contract, they just want to get access to this data because they know how valuable it is. That same contract you're signing, think about that's how much more valuable your data is now. And that really goes across all echelons. And really, yeah. So with that being said, so we do, or we will in future episodes as well, we'll break down some of the current events going on, whether it's in cyber or sports. We'll break those down and kind of pull them apart each episode, whether it's, the Green Bay Packers getting hacked, which happened, I think last year, maybe 2 years ago now. Really anything that we see that catches our eyes that could have sports applicability, we will use that. And then also for the listeners, we do welcome feedback 100% of the way. So please send us questions, stories, or even some of the scams you've seen targeting your industry, the sports industry. If you work in the sports industry, we'd love to see those so that way we can educate others. I know that's probably going to be big in the NIL world. Steve mentioned family members. You'll have a lot of people faking who they are to get access to your family members and say, "Hey, I'm an NIL representative. I'm trying to get in contact with your son or your daughter. I just need some information real quick." And then it spirals. So we'll look at those as well.
Watch out for the Nigerian princes who want to
Yeah,
sponsor you.
right. They've gotten a little smarter.
Yeah.
And that's what's funny is that, I mean, you mentioned the Nigerian prince, but the tactic hasn't changed, man. It's
No, it
been
still works.
2
I just
decades.
read
It
an
hasn't.
article. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just read an article, not about sports or anything, but an older lady was taken for like pretty much her life savings, like a few $100,000. because somebody online acted like somebody real famous that she liked, and somehow they knew she liked that individual and convinced her that they were them. And she somehow sent all their money, and it was like,
There you go. Yep.
that's all it
Some
takes is
people's
something.
children, and it's just, and it's hard. Like I don't want to say I would never victim blame, right? When it comes to cybersecurity incidents, but it's hard because you have different generations
Yep.
living through the same domain. So it's really hard when you see something like that. Because I think I know what you're talking about. It was an older lady who did it,
Hmm.
and they could be just susceptible to it, not knowing. Again,
Yep.
educating people to understand that, like, hey, now if you're just out there clicking on links after you've been educated, okay, now it's probably a you problem issue, right? But those are things. Nigerian princes are still as relevant as ever. They just come in
Yeah.
a different cloak, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so this will wrap up episode 1. If you want to find Steve or I on LinkedIn, and we're both active on LinkedIn, you can go to Victory Cybersecurity. Our LinkedIn profiles are on there. Check out the blog, right? We do update the blog every week or two with something. I think in the future we're also doing a newsletter which will be coming out, which will be awesome. And then really just reach out and contact us. And then remember, right? Hackers don't quit when the clock runs out. So make sure you're out there protecting yourself. Steve, appreciate you joining me for episode 1
Absolutely.
in the
I
book.
look forward
So
to this.
yeah, I'll see you next episode, man.